Opening a pack and rifling through with nervous anticipation of which rare you're going to get is a feeling shared by so many players. But for all the Timmies out there are few bigger letdowns than opening a land as your rare. Sometimes, getting one particular kind of land is one of the most exciting things that could happen to you. Welcome to Fetchlands. Fetchlands are lands that can be used to search your deck for a land, usually with the basic land type, by tapping them and paying a cost, usually sacrificing them in addition to paying life. The initial cycle of Fetchlands was printed in Mirage, came into play tapped, and could be tapped and sacrificed to search out an untapped land with an allied basic land type. They traded off being a bit slow, with the ability to fix your mana. The next incarnation of Fetchlands came in Onslaught. They come into play untapped, but added the cost of paying 1 life to search out an untapped land with an allied color basic land type. These were referred to as Allied Fetchlands and were reprinted later in Khans of Tarkir and Fate Reforged. After Onslaught, Shards of Alara added the Panorama Fetches. These came into play untapped, could tap to add a colorless mana, and could be activated by paying 1 colorless mana, tapping it, and sacrificing it to find a tapped basic land of the corresponding shard. These added the ability to produce mana to a fetch land, and could find one of 3 basic land types, but only produce colorless mana, and could only search out tapped basic lands. The final addition to the Fetchland timeline was the cycle of enemy fetches, that by paying 1 life, tapping and sacrificing them, could search out an untapped land with an enemy color basic land type. They were originally printed in the first visit to the plane of Zendikar, and haven't been reprinted in the standard legal set. Along the way, there have been other kinds of fetches with different limitations, like searching out any tapped basic land, searching out an untapped basic, or searching out only specific land types. But when people mention Fetchlands, they're usually referring to the cycles of Fetchlands printed originally in Zendikar and Onslaught. Although seemingly unimpressive on their own, when combined with the cycles of Shocklands from any of the Ravnica blocks, which have 2 basic land types, they can allow players to perfectly fix their mana at the cost of only 3 life. For example, in a deck that runs all of the 10 Shocklands and any traditional Fetchland, it could grab 7 out of the 10 Shocklands and be able to produce at least 1 mana of any color. Some decks, such as Death's Shadow, even use the life cost as an upside. In Legacy and Vintage, they mitigate the minor drawback of Shocklands by searching out the original dual lands, which have 2 basic land types and come into play untapped. Having lands in the graveyard also fuel cards like Tarmogoyf, Uro Titan of Nature's Wrath, and Gurmag Angler. Add in cards with landfall triggers such as Bloodghast, Groundswell, and Lotus Cobra, and you start to get the big picture of why these cards are so sought after. Since mana fixing and lands are so important to the game, typical Fetchlands are highly sought after cards and have driven the price up and up. Among 6 of the top 8 decks in the modern metagame, just the Shock and Fetchlands alone made up anywhere from 28 to 52% of the deck's overall cost, with the average cost being $322 for just the mana base. This price tag has become a sticking point for many players who consider the price barrier too high for older formats. Although the Shocklands have had 3 standard legal printings to help keep their prices in check, the allied cycle of Fetchlands have only had 1 standard legal reprinting, and the enemy Fetchlands have only been reprinted in the supplemental Modern Masters 2017. Mark Rosewater has stated on his blog, in addition to power level concerns, the excess shuffling caused a bunch of tournament issues of matches going long, as reasons to keep Fetchlands from being reprinted in standard legal sets. Although they were reprinted as box toppers in Zendikar Rising, and the enemy Fetchlands were reprinted as a limited secret lair drop, these reprintings haven't created a meaningful supply to drive the cost of a mana base down. However, in 2021, in Modern Horizons 2, there will be a reprinting of the enemy Fetchlands to hopefully make a dent in the price tag. In the meantime, the box toppers from Zendikar Rising are an absolutely gorgeous addition to any collection, and are currently almost as expensive as the original and other reprintings. Be sure to check them out.